Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In case you're new here, my name is Laura and I'm a PhD student of Comparative Literature in Germany, researching literary theory, mainly hermeneutics and aesthetics. And this is my series on literary theory in which I explain important concepts and ideas. And today we want to talk about the hermeneutic circle or the hermeneutic spiral, which is a very important concept which has been relevant for hermeneutics over decades and centuries actually. I quickly want to introduce to you where the hermeneutic circle comes from, how it was transformed over the centuries, and also the advantages and disadvantages, and also the critique that has been formulated against it. And I also want to give a statement in the end of why I think the hermeneutic circle is still very relevant for interpretation and methodology today. So where does the idea of the hermeneutic circle come from? We don't know actually how long it dates back, but it was written down for the first time by the scholar Friedrich Ast in his textbook on hermeneutics, in which he wrote down the so-called demand, aus dem Einzelnen den Geist des Ganzen zu finden und durch das Ganze das Einzelne zu begreifen. In English, this is to find the spirit of the whole from the individual and to understand the individual through the whole. So you've got parts and you've got the whole, and the idea is that you will only ever understand the whole, like a whole text, for example, through understanding all of its parts, and you will also understand the parts only through looking at them in the context of the whole text. So this is a very important concept, and actually it's been called by Friedrich Ast the basic law of all understanding and cognition, or in German, das Grundgesetz alles Verstehens und Erkennens. And Friedrich Schleiermacher, who I've been talking about a lot in the other videos I've been making on hermeneutics in general and also hermeneutics in regard of misunderstanding and not understanding. Schleiermacher builds huge parts of his hermeneutics on this idea of the hermeneutic circle, understanding parts through the whole and the whole through the parts, or also called the individual. In a methodological way, the idea of the hermeneutic circle is like a circular reading, a cursory reading, in which you read the text and you read it over and over again. And during the reading, you form a basic understanding, and through the rereading of parts and the whole, you gain new ideas, new understanding, and you circle around in the text in a way. So this way you can form a better understanding from time to time as you spend a lot of time with the text and you pay attention both to the details but also to the whole of it. And the idea is that the pre-understanding, or also the presuppositions and the prejudices also that people bring to the text when they read it for the first time, will change over time through the reading and rereading. And this is a very important aspect, as the reflective thinking and the critical part of the reading process, also critically thinking about your own opinions and ideas about the text, is a core aspect of hermeneutics, and especially of the hermeneutic circle, in my view. An important question is also, what is the whole and what are the parts? There could be different concepts of that. Schleiermacher gives different definitions of that. It depends on the angle of observation, whether a part and a whole is something big or something small. For example, a part could just be a word and the whole the sentence. A part could also be a chapter and the whole book. A part could also be a book and the collection of the whole work of an author, all of his works together. A part could also be all the works of an author in relation to the writings of his time, so in his epoch, for example. So you have different ideas and concepts of parts and wholes, and it is important to make clear what you mean when you use that concept and you refer to it as a methodological approach, I think. This is also what Schleiermacher is talking about a lot. The hermeneutic circle as a concept has been very relevant throughout the centuries. It has also been carried on by the pupil of Schleiermacher in a way, Wilhelm Dilthey, who has been using that concept as well. It has also been adapted by Heidegger and Gadamer, but they have a very ontological view of hermeneutics. Hermeneutics as an idea of something existential, of understanding ourselves within the world and understanding each other. And the idea for Heidegger is to get into the hermeneutic circle, not to get out of it. You can look at that in more detail in a video I will link below from a professor who did a whole lecture only on this idea of the concept of the hermeneutic circle after Heidegger and Gadamer. If you're interested in that, it is very informative, but it is not my field of specialty, so I leave it to others to explain that in more detail. I just want to talk about the advantages and the disadvantages of the hermeneutic circle, because I think it's important to make clear what lies at hand here. I think the biggest advantage of the hermeneutic circle is that it has such a strong emphasis on the context of the text, or also just parts of the text. It asks the reader to take into account the context, being it the context of the whole text, being it the context of the historical, biographical, cultural context, the background information that you need to make sure that you gain a deeper and better understanding of a text. And I think the hermeneutic circle is also very advantageous because it can make you reflect deeper on your own process. It can help you sharpening your understanding and forming a better understanding and reflecting on your own ideas and prejudices. And it is also flexible because you can move from different angles. You can change your perspective. You can also change the scope of the things you're looking at. For example, you could look at something in very close detail and form like a kind of close reading, but you can also go further backwards and look at the text in relation to all its other texts that emerged in the time being, or also other cultural productions even. And as long as you reflect on that and you make sure that you're into that very deeply, that can help you gain a very much deeper understanding. So the flexibility, the preciseness, and the reflection of your own thought process, I think these are the most important advantages of the hermeneutic circle. But we also want to talk about the disadvantages. One of the main aspects that has been discussed, I think, is that the hermeneutic circle can lead to a circular kind of understanding and also be quite subjective. So if you're spending all this time alone with your thoughts and the text, there's the danger of repeating your own thought patterns and staying inside them. So actually not gaining any new ideas and informations because you only engage with your own thoughts on the text. And as you read and reread, it is not a given that you form new and better ideas and understandings. So that's a very important aspect, I think. It can also be seen as difficult that the hermeneutic circle also implies that it is a never-ending process and understanding will never be finished or completed. And therefore you can, like, if you follow that thought, you could come to the conclusion that you can never really form a satisfying interpretation and a finished or a whole interpretation of something. But I think that isn't really true, because although you will never have a final understanding that you can not improve, I think you can get to a point at which you feel like you understood the text well, or well enough to be able to draw some conclusions on it and to say something about what the text is actually about, what it wants to say, what you think it is important about it. But it's definitely a point that is to be discussed. And depending on how you actually enact the hermeneutic circle as a methodological step or approach, there's also the risk of overlooking some details as you focus, for example, more on the whole than on the individual parts. But I think also this is a risk that you can overcome by making sure that you look at all the details and you have looked at every single word at best, or at every single sentence, every verse, everything that could mean something to you, that could be exciting and relevant. But I want to talk about one very, very interesting idea that has been suggested by many literary scholars, actually, mainly by Jürgen Bolton, I think. The idea is that you approach this concept of the hermeneutic circle not as a circle but as a spiral. With the circle you have the problem that there's this idea that you encircle the object that is to be understood, being it a text or something, and you get closer and closer to the center of it until you finally get there and you finally understand everything. That could be the picture that you draw for the hermeneutic circle. So actually you encircle something so long that you really get to the point of it, to the center of it. But the conception of a spiral is more open, as it describes that you just circle around it and that you can just always approach it, but you will never really get to the center as you just spiral around it. There's a very good quote by Jürgen Bolton, which I want to read to you in translation. It goes like this: understanding a text therefore means understanding features of the text structure or text content and text production, taking into account the history of the text and history of its reception, as well as reflecting on one's own interpretative standpoint in the sense of a reciprocal relationship of justification. The fact that there can be neither wrong nor right interpretations, but at best more or less appropriate ones, follows from the historicity of the constituents of understanding and the associated inclusiveness of the hermeneutic spiral. In accordance with the spiral movement, interpretation is subject to a mechanism of self-correction with regard to the formation of its hypothesis. It goes without saying that this process always follows the central theme of a specific epistemological interest, and that one should therefore not proceed in a methodologically pluralistic and additive manner when dealing with the aspects of interpretation, but rather selectivity. So I think that what is important here is that you have this correction of your own hypothesis throughout the process of interpretation and understanding. And you can you start your interpretation, your understanding with some sort of hypothesis about the text. And then you start your first reading. You gain an idea about the whole, because you have to read the whole first before you can pay attention to the details, as this wouldn't make so much sense as you don't have an idea of the background of the whole. But then you can go about it in more detail, and you can read and reread it and form your hypothesis and correct them, change them, and make them more precise, more in accordance with the text and the context. And I think Jürgen Bolton here also refers to the idea that you should not aim at different methodological approaches, but rather focus on this very basic idea, actually, and just follow the principles that hermeneutics gives you at hand. I think that it makes a lot of sense, and I hope that this short introduction into the Hermeneutic Circle could convince you, or maybe it could just interest you in a way. I think it is a very, very strong methodological idea because, as I said, you can reflect so well, you can change your ideas. It is not the ideas that you just use this principle and then you will always come up with the best interpretations. It is also not suggesting that there's only one correct, single right interpretation, but rather that you as a reader also bring something to the whole process, because it's only you making assumptions, drawing conclusions, coming up with ideas and interpretations. So your interpretation will always be different from that of another, but still you can make sure that the other one can understand you well as you follow the other person, as you let the other person in on your thought process when showing how this iterative reading and rereading and your thought process goes about, how you draw your conclusions, how you form a hypothesis and change that hypothesis. And I think changing your ideas and also making sure that you write that down in your interpretation so others can actually comprehend what you're thinking and how your thinking changed, that is very, very powerful. And that is why I think hermeneutics, and especially the hermeneutic circle, is such a strong element and a strong principle to apply in interpretation. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you're interested in the idea of hermeneutics and literary theory in general, I recommend that you subscribe to the playlist that I will link here and also below in the info box. I've been creating 2 videos beforehand on the hermeneutics of Schleiermacher and on understanding and misunderstanding, which is also a very important concept in hermeneutics. There will be more videos on hermeneutics, on aesthetics, also on my PhD project itself. If you're interested, just follow along. I will try to make sure that the videos will be at the length of this, like between 15-20 minutes. So it is not too much information, but also not too short. I really enjoy creating these videos, so just stay tuned if you enjoy it too, and let me know what you think of the Hermeneutic Circle and hermeneutics in general. Thank you very much. Bye bye.